How's it going, my friends? Back with another video, and today we're going to be talking about the Nikon Z8. Yes, I finally got my hands on a Z8, and I'm wicked excited to talk about it. Now, if you've been following this channel, you know that we've been using the Z lineup from Nikon for weddings, full-time, professional photography, since they first released. I mean, we were the first ones at our camera store at Hunt's Video to actually buy the Z6. We've moved on to the Z6iis, and now we've incorporated a Z8. So I want to talk about it from a perspective of a wedding photographer and somebody who really shoots with this thing heavily, okay? I'm not the type, yes, we do use all Nikon equipment. I'm not a Nikon fanboy though. I'm not like the type of person that's afraid to talk about the negative and the positive stuff. And believe me, there's some negative things about this camera that I'm gonna break down with you. So, first off, what's important to a wedding photographer? I got some notes here on my phone that I've been making over the past 2 weeks. I've done 3 weddings, 2 engagement sessions, and a senior portrait shoot actually with this in the last 2 weeks. So I've been able to really feel it out. I didn't want to just buy it and then just do one wedding and then jump onto it. I wanted to wait until I had at least 3 under my belt and then a couple engagement shoots to really get a feel for it. And you know, I definitely feel like I'm qualified to talk about it now because, you know, I've shot, let's see, probably on average of 3,000 photos for each wedding. So, you know, close, probably a little bit under 10,000 images so far with it. And, you know, I have a lot to say. So, in terms of a wedding photographer, like what's the most important, like, bullet points when you're looking for a camera? Obviously, there's a million things that they do nowadays, but what are the most important things? What I look for, ergonomics, and these aren't in order, they're just the bullet points that are important. Ergonomics, wake up speed, battery life, overheating, autofocus, dynamic range, white balance, and then the button layout / menus. Okay, those are the most important things that I'm looking for in a new camera. And the Z6 II, well, the Z6 definitely had its drawbacks, but it was good enough for us to use them at weddings and feel that it was a smart move to move from DSLRs into the mirrorless lineup as quick as possible. Yes, there were definitely drawbacks, especially when it first came out with the autofocus. A few different things. It was a slower camera, single card slot, things like that. But they were good enough for us to use, so we bought 4 of them right off the bat and we started using them. Z6 II was a huge improvement. It really was, and I still love that camera. And this review is going to be a good amount of comparison between the Z8 and the Z6 II, and if you should upgrade, because if you're on, I know that there's a lot of people that are on the fence of, hey, you know, I have the Z6 II, or I want to get into the mirrorless line, what should I go for? Z8's a big investment, so it's important to have these videos of people that have been out in the field and shooting that can actually tell you the good and the bad with this stuff, because across YouTube, everyone's just saying that it's like, you know, the best thing since sliced bread, and like, it's a great camera overall, but there's definitely some drawbacks and some things you need to think about, especially if your budget's limited. So I'm the type of guy that likes to end on a good note. So let's start with the negative stuff that I've seen, okay? So I have a few different things that we're gonna talk about. So the first thing is the freaking wheels on this body, okay? Shutter speed in the back, aperture in the front. These wheels right here are not good quality. Okay, and I've been talking about ergonomics and build quality for, I mean, throughout my whole channel. Anybody who's a professional photographer knows that ergonomics and build quality and just the feel of the camera in your hands, I can't say it enough how important it is. It's almost as important as, it pretty much is as important as all the technical specs, how fast the autofocus is, all the other things that people talk about more. But the build quality, how does it feel in your hand? How easy are the dials to turn? How responsive is it? What is the button layout? Because when you're on a job, photographers by nature, you know, unless you're, you know, a portrait photographer, studio photographer, where things are very, very slow and controlled, the majority of the time it's going to be very fast movement, fast work. And I can't think of anything faster than weddings. I mean, there really are. Even sports photography, you're shooting fast action, but you're really in one place. You know, you're setting up, you're on tripods most of the time, and you're in a certain place. You know, you do move around, but you're not moving around like a wedding. A wedding is run and gun. You have very little time in different sections to break things up. You have to really get the shot. You don't have much time to screw around. And you know, you can't miss the moment. So if you're fiddling around with the buttons or they're not as responsive, it's a big problem. Now the main thing, I'd say the aperture wheel is fine. It's okay, it feels a little chinky or whatever, but this shutter speed wheel, it does not, you need to be able to sink your finger in, or your thumb into it and have it really grip and have that response. And I just don't feel the response. Like it does work, but I have to really push down and it's not fast. The Z6 II is amazing. That body is so good in the hands, and the wheel on the back to switch that shutter speed and, you know, my ISO and stuff, it's just really nice. And it might sound like a small thing, but it's really not. I've actually noticed it out in the field. I'm like, man, this is just not as easy to turn, and I don't feel like I get the best response from it like I did in the other cameras on the mirrorless lineup. So I'm gonna give that one a negative right there for the wheels, and I just don't, I just wish that they would have invested more in this build setup, because, you know, we can move on to ergonomics and build quality. This camera does feel like a DSLR, but not as quality as like a D850, obviously a D700. That thing was like a brick, but I mean, let's go to the D850, okay? It doesn't feel as quality as the D850, but it does feel as big. It's probably not just about, I haven't done the exact size comparisons, but you know, I remember I shot with my D850 for a long time, and it was a big camera, but it felt good in the hands, and it felt like if I really dropped it or threw it against something, it wouldn't just break up. This one does not feel as robust, I guess is the right word, okay? It's not as comfortable in my hand. The grippy material here is not as good. Okay, it's just not as good. The Z6 II was perfect because it was a little bit smaller. Now I used the Miike grip on the bottom. It just extended it a little bit so my pinky could go on the bottom of it. This one I don't need that Miike grip or any other grip. I actually have a an extended grip for this Z8, but it's just ridiculous. It's way too big, especially for weddings. I'm not going to carry that around all day. This one does fit my hand. It's just it's my hand kind of slides around, honestly. It's not as grippy as the other stuff. It definitely should be more grippy. I mean, this thing should be like freaking sandpaper. Like when I put my hand on it, it should be like glue. It should really stick, and it doesn't. I can kind of feel it slipping a little bit, and I've noticed that on the wedding day I have to grip it a lot tighter to actually hold. And you know, this is the 58-1.4 lens, so this is a small lens on it, but I've been using a 24-70 this year, and you know, it adds a substantial amount of weight to it. So I'm having to really grip it a lot, and it feels kind of side heavy, okay? Like it really does. So the grip is a problem, it really is, and I'm not loving that. I'm really not. I wish they would have made more grip, and I wish they would have increased the quality of the wheels and the dials here. All right, let's move on. Let's see, screen articulation. Okay, so it's better and it's worse than the Z6 II. So it's better in the fact that yes, you get more articulation angles, okay? What's really nice is when you're in portrait mode like this, you can pull it down and I can see it like that. I couldn't do that on the Z6. So I have been using this a lot because at weddings I shoot at, you know, I shoot like this, vertical a lot. So I am using it like this. But it's just weird, you know, I really wish that this thing they would have made something where it could flip out so I could actually use it for filming to see myself when I'm doing the YouTube videos. I'm still filming this on the Z6 II. It doesn't flip around so I can't see myself, and it's weird. It like comes out on two levels. Like it doesn't feel real solid. It actually feels, I'm kind of scared I'm gonna break it like at some point. And so I'm going to say it's better than the Z6 II in the fact that I get more angles with it, but it's not as good as the Z6 II, where I can't grab it as fast and open it up. I have to spend like an extra second, like, you know, kind of getting my orientation right. The Z6 II was super easy. Like the folds were perfect where it stuck out where I grabbed it to flip out, super easy. So when I'm, you know, getting a low shot, very easy to do it. You know, like I said, it's just because I'm a wedding photographer, these things, I notice these things and they slow me down and it bothers me, you know? And so I would say that you get a plus because it's more angles, but I really wish it was easier and it felt a little beefier and less likely that I was going to break it. I mean, I really feel like I'm going to be out in the field one day, I'm going to flip this out in the wrong way, and I'm just going to bend something, and then the screen's not going to sit in correctly after. So that's a negative for it. Let's see. Strap lug issue. This camera is one of the ones that was affected by the strap lug issue. Now, if you haven't heard, these little lugs right here that you have your neck strap on, they're actually pulling out, okay? And some people are dropping their cameras on site using them, and Nikon has acknowledged this. It's a recall situation, so I'm gonna have to send it back to Nikon after wedding season is over and have them repair it. But you know, it's just one of those things that you're spending $4,000 for a body. Nikon is known for their quality, their build quality. Professional photographers have been using Nikon stuff for so long, and it's just been known for the quality. And it just sucks that they had something. I'm pretty sure that this is not built in Japan. I think they outsourced it to Taiwan. And the last thing you should have to worry about is your neck strap breaking off and the camera falling down to the ground. I mean, especially if you pay this amount of money for it. So it's just something that makes me a little disappointed. I know that Nikon has acknowledged it and they're gonna fix it for free. That's great. I mean, it's not gonna make me not buy the Z8, but it's something that's makes me apprehensive, and it's a bummer to see because that's a big deal. Dropping this thing on the ground because your neck strap broke and it was the camera's fault is a huge deal. All right, so let's see, the feel, the grip. Okay, let's talk about overheating. I was shooting this on Friday. Today is Monday. Had a wedding yesterday, Saturday off. Friday, we had a wedding. I was doing hybrid shooting, so I was shooting a highlight film plus photography at the same time. So I was doing short video clips. I was only shooting in 1080, 60 frames a second. I wasn't even shooting in 4K, okay? And I was doing, honestly, I think the longest burst of video I got was probably 15 seconds. So I was doing very short bursts of video in 1080p. It was hot. I was about 91 degrees. And, it wasn't a cool day, definitely not. But I got a hot card warning. Now, when I got the hot card warning, I was only shooting photos. I was in the middle of a photo session. I wasn't doing any video, okay? I was only doing video, and I got a hot card warning. This thing was freaking hot. If you go through threads, you'll know that the left side, the left bottom side here by the ports, this area gets extremely hot, and it really does. Nothing, my Z6ii, I've shot that thing in probably a good 150 weddings over the years. I mean, we've been extremely busy, probably about 120 weddings. And I never got any hot card warnings. I never felt like the body was really overheating. I've shot video, done highlight films, switched between video and photo modes, and nothing ever heated up on that. But this, it's a problem, okay? Like I said, I wasn't even shooting video, guys. Believe me if you want, but it's the truth. I was getting hot card warnings just shooting photos, still photos. That's not good. That's not good at all. Now, I was using a SanDisk card. I did some digging, and it looks like the SanDisks are kind of known for, getting hot, but in my Z6ii I've used SanDisks, and I've used, regular pro-grade cards, never got any type of overheating or hot card warning, so I was having to open up the door, take it out, blow on the cards, just give them a break, you know what I mean, and switch to my Z6ii because I carry two bodies, especially when I'm just switching over to a new camera. I don't want to just have this on me. I needed to have something back up in case something like this did happen, and thank God I did. But hot card warnings just for photos. I mean, look, I ordered some Delkin cards, okay? I got these Delkin Powers because apparently these are a little bit better at throwing heat, but if you are shooting and the photo and video capabilities of the Z8 are phenomenal. They're unbelievable. There's plenty of videos out there that'll talk about the specs of video. I'm not going to go into it. I'm going in the good and bad from my perspective. But if you want something that does not overheat, you're going to have to go for the Z9 because the interior components, the heat sinks in here, are not throwing away heat like they should if you're a heavy duty shooter, okay? The specs are there, but the actual components of the stuff that should just run in the background, like throwing heat away, That's not up to par. It's really not. And like I said, I would expect this if I was shooting, you know, 8K video for like, you know, 10-minute bursts or something like that. Okay, you're gonna get some overheating, you're gonna get hot cards, especially if it's in the summertime. But I was just shooting photos. I mean, I was blasting, you know, I was shooting a lot of photos, but I mean, photos, you know, it shouldn't have happened. So I did get a hot card warning. Hopefully I'll give you guys an update on the Delkin cards. Hopefully that won't happen with the Delkins, and I'm gonna return the SanDisk because I bought a 256 gig, you know, Extreme Pro SanDisk, and I hope that that was just something to do with the card. But it does get, the body actually gets hot on the opposite side of the cards, okay? So it is an issue. Let's see here. No target with lock on. Okay, now I've looked into everything here and I cannot find it. So if I am wrong about this, please let me know. But one of the best things about the Z6 II, the autofocus mode I used 90% of the time was I'd use face tracking with eye autofocus, but then I would have my function button in the front set to bring up the target with the lock on. Okay, so I literally push a button, I punch in, and the target would come up and I could lock on to any subject. So probably 90% of the time it would get the correct face, it would get the correct eye, everything was in focus when I'm moving around, you know, some clients or whatever at a wedding. But sometimes it would miss, it would back focus or it would focus on the wrong person or something like that. And in an instant I could just push the function button, bring up the target, lock on with the back button focus, and as long as I'm holding on to that, it's gonna track it. I can't program that with the Z8. It doesn't give me that option. Why? Why? Because the autofocus, and I'm going to get into the whole autofocus section, autofocus is a lot better on this camera, but it still does miss sometimes. I need a way to override that quickly and not have to, you know, roll into a new menu or something like that, hold the button, roll it. I just need to be able to punch in with a function button, bring up a target, have it lock onto the correct thing. It doesn't have that with the Z6. So what I was having to do is I could program it to that the dynamic the dynamic one with the little square with a bunch of dots around. I can bring that up to punch in, but that doesn't lock on the target. So I'd have to, it just lands in the middle of the screen. I pull that in, I can punch it, I can refocus on something, and then, you know, recompose the shot, but it's not gonna track it. That was a huge thing with the Z6, and honestly, it made me in a couple situations use the Z6 over the Z8 in the last wedding yesterday. Nikon, please update that. That should be a firmware update that you can add to the menus. I need that target box back. I really need it because the eye autofocus is great, but it doesn't work every single time, okay? Especially when there's a lot of people in the frame. You have guests, you have wedding party, and then your subjects. Sometimes it misses, and I need to be able to override it really quickly. So that's a bad one. Let's see here. Next negative is, let's talk about the eye autofocus. So it still falls off the correct faces sometimes. Just does. Okay? I mean, it's a lot better than the Z6, 100%. Major improvement. You can feel it snappier. You can feel it stays on. 3D tracking is good. And the eye autofocus is great. But for instance, yesterday, the first dance, the couple was in front of me, and then the whole wedding party was lined up behind them. I had eye autofocus on, and it jumped to the back a couple times from the client to the wedding party behind them. It shouldn't happen, you know, like it shouldn't happen. And it was very difficult to actually get it back. I had to override it with that punch in with the 3D tracking, or I'm sorry, the dynamic area autofocus, and you know, get it back to the clients that I was trying to shoot. And I actually did miss one really good shot. It was out of focus because of it. And I haven't missed a shot with the Z6 II in a long time, So I think it's gonna be a little bit of you know, learning curve. Like, it's not, from what I've heard, and this is the thing is, I'll be honest with you guys, I haven't used any of the newer mirrorless cameras in the other brands. I've really stuck with Nikon. So that's why I can talk about this stuff like with authority, because I've been with the Z6 from the beginning all the way to this for years now, right from the beginning. So I know these cameras really, really well. But I'm not gonna say, hey, this is better than the, you know, the Canon's better, the Sony's better, or something like that. I don't know what they're doing, honestly. I'm just talking about the Z6. And in terms of the different iterations, it has improved a lot, but it's still skipping and jumping from the main subject to people in the frame sometimes. And that's why the target punch in is so incredibly important, because if it overrides, if it goes to something else, I need to be able to override it quickly, and I can't be flipping through menus or hoping that it jumps back. So it does fall off. If it's just, you know, a couple subjects in the frame, 99% of the time, it's actually going to pick up somebody. And one thing that I should mention is, if it does jump to somebody else in the frame that's not the main subject, it's always going to land on an eye. It's very good at picking up the faces and the eyes. Absolutely very good. It's just, sometimes it's still kind of erratic, and it like jumps to the back. So it almost seems like there's a propensity for it to jump to the back, which you know, it's a big disappointment. So it's the Z6, I mean the Z8 autofocus isn't 100% there yet. It's a much better improvement, but it's not 100% there yet where I could just stay in eye autofocus or phase tracking the whole time and know it's going to pick up the correct subject. Let's see, battery life. It definitely sucks more battery than the Z6ii, and that's to be expected. It's a better processor. It's more stuff going on here. I didn't expect that it was going to be, you know, anything crazy, you know, in terms of like staying as consistent as the Z6ii in terms of battery life. But it does use, I use about an extra battery at a wedding. So yesterday I shot for 8 hours. And I use 2.5 batteries, maybe a little bit more than 2.5. So I have to carry an extra battery. Before I'd use 1.5, now I'm using about 2.5. So, and that's 8 hours of shooting, around 5,000 photos. Well, between, I'd say 3,500 to 5,000 photos for every single wedding. So pretty good, but definitely uses more batteries, but nothing like crazy. I mean, I carry around a little bag with me anyways at a wedding wherever I go. So I always have extra batteries and cards and things like that with me. So it's not a huge deal. Definitely not enough for making me use that ridiculous battery grip. I mean, the extended battery grip for the Z8 is just, it's huge. It's crazy. Let's see here. They haven't improved the wake up speed much. Now, this is one of the top parts of my, you know, things I look for in a camera. You need to have, when this thing is, I use 2 cameras, so I have one around my neck, and then I have a black rapid strap off to the side here, and I'll shoot some photos, and you know, I'll shut it off and then just drop it. When I flip it back on, it needs to come on. I'd say the faster the better, okay? The faster this thing activates and ready for shooting, the better. I have trained myself to where if I see a photo or I know I want to take a picture, I'm flipping it on as my hand is touching it down, so by the time it's already at my face, it's pretty much there. But I need this thing, I mean, ideally, I would like to have it instant, okay? And there hasn't been really any improvement from the Z6 to the Z8, which I was hoping there would be. It's not enough to make me be like, oh, this is too slow for me to use at a wedding. Definitely not. But I just wanted to touch on the fact that the wake-up speed hasn't improved between the Z8 and the Z6ii, in my experience, from what I've seen from 3 weddings, 2 engagement shoots, and a senior portrait shoot. And then lastly, in the negative, is there's no improvement in speed from switching to photo and video. Now, I do a lot of hybrid shooting. We're constantly, even if we're not getting paid for a, video job, if we're just hired specifically for photo, I'm still switching between photo and video mode to grab behind the scenes content, stuff to make reels and things like that. So we're always grabbing video clips. And you know, there's no improvement in speed. I would like to see it pretty much instant. You know, you flip in photo mode, flip it to video, and you can immediately start shooting. There's still a little bit of a delay there. Like I said, it's probably like the wake up speed. It's not enough to inhibit me from doing my job, but there is a little bit of a noticeable delay there. Okay, so I'm just being real with you guys from a wedding photographer's perspective. I know that there is no perfect camera. That doesn't exist, but there should be fundamental things: build quality, wake up speed, you know, reliability, things like that. You know, that should just hit and should just work. And Nikon should really focus on those little details that make me doing my job faster, rather than trying to pack in as many type of, like, you know, hot button ticket like technical specs or something like that. Like 8K, I don't really care about that. You know, I say probably I'm not a videographer by trade. I'm a photographer by trade that does some video, but you know, 8K, I mean, that's less important to me than the speed and the reliability of the camera. Okay, so that's the negative stuff that I've seen, honestly. Let's go to the good. Very fast autofocus, much better than the Z6 or the Z6ii. Okay, now I did touch on the fact that it does jump to the back sometimes, but that's just because it's not perfect autofocus. jumping from the Z6ii to the Z8 there's no doubt about it, it's a major improvement. It's much faster, much more confident, much more secure. Like, it's stickier with the eye autofocus and the face tracking. I can trust it. I really feel like I can trust it. Sometimes with the Z6, I was having to, like family formals, for instance, I would have to punch in and zoom in just to really check the focus on the face before I take the photos. This one, if it's on the eye or if it's on the face, I know it's in focus. So confidence is the right word. It's much more confident, okay? I feel like it's a modern autofocus system. I feel like it's a beefy autofocus system. It's an expensive autofocus system. It does need to be tweaked, okay? Something with the programming. I don't think it's the processor or the hardware aspect of it, the reason why it's jumping to the back sometimes, or, you know, not locking on the right faces. I think it's a software issue, okay? Now, I'm not an engineer. I don't know that for a fact, but just for me, it feels like this isn't a lack of memory or processing speed. It's really something with their algorithm or how they wrote it. It's not as definite when you have multiple people in the frame. But the autofocus is amazing, okay? And it's hard to say that, you know, the last couple minutes of me talking about this autofocus, it sounds like I'm kind of dogging on it. It's not. I'm just being real with you guys from what I've seen out in the field. It's a huge improvement from the Z6 II. It for sure is. And it's very nice, you know? I mean, it's very nice. It feels like it's a more quality camera with the autofocus, for sure. So that's great. White balance. Dude, let's talk about the white balance. The white balance on this camera is so much better than the Z6. I have had to spend so much less time editing skin tones, okay? The white balance is perfect, okay? I just leave it in auto. And it's freaking amazing. With the Z6 II, I was having to kind of pay more attention to my white balance, especially when we were in reception areas and there's, you know, a barn situation or there's wood or something like that. It's kind of like that orangey feel. I would have to manually adjust it. Nothing with the Z8. The skin tones are perfect. The light looks good. The colors look good. Everything looks awesome. And that is what I've come to expect from Nikon over the years, is the build quality and the colors. Image quality is amazing, okay? So that has been a huge upgrade, okay? Huge upgrade, because as a wedding photographer, somebody who shoots people, you need to understand how important white balance really is. It is the backbone of everything when you're shooting people. I think it was Albert Watson who said that if you can do anything as a photographer as long as you make people look good. And that is the 100% truth. You have to make people look good in photography, and skin tones are the backbone of that. They don't want to look red, they don't want to look orange. They want to look natural and they want to look good. And your white balance, if it's on, bang on every single time, and it gives people pleasing looks to their skin, makes them look human and pleasing to the eye, it's going to save you just incredible amounts of work. And sometimes you can't even get it right. When the white balance is way off, like it was sometimes with the Z6, it would just make the job so much harder to edit, and sometimes you couldn't even get it perfect. But the camera's making good decisions. The Z8 is amazing with white balance. Don't sleep on that point. That's really important. No blackout, okay? So no blackout is freaking awesome, and it wasn't until I started shooting with this no blackout that I actually really realized how amazing it was. So when you're shooting, if you guys don't know about this, with the Z6 II, obviously every time you press the shutter button, it's a quick recycle of the screen. So you get a blackout and then the screen comes back and the image comes back. With this, there's no blackout, so it's just shooting straight on. And it's really helpful when you're shooting people, because how Sarah and I work is we'll get people in the general pose. We like posing people, but we'll get them in the mechanical position first, which is kind of like a boundary. And then with that, once we have that set, we have a way of creating movement inside of the pose. So it's the pose is the boundary, and then the movement is where the actual photo happens, and you get that connection and the realness of the photo. Now, with the blackout, you're kind of just, you know, once you start shooting, you're kind of like, you don't really see what's going on because the screen is recycling so fast. You can't see people's micro movements, and micro movements are really where the great photos happen. So with the no blackout, I can kind of see as the bride or the groom is turning, you know, or moving or whatever. I can anticipate where I need to move to get the shot correct. So the no blackout is amazing. The downside is I shoot a lot more, so I have more photos to cull, but you know, I'd rather have more photos to cull and have the right photos than you know, have to anticipate. It's hard. I was shooting between the Z6ii and the Z8 yesterday at the last wedding, and it was I felt when I was doing the portraits that we really set up and posed, I was much happier being on the Z8. So the no blackout is a major plus. 132,000 shutter and 64 ISO is huge. I mean, there's just no other way around it. Amazing to have a shutter that goes up to 132,000 and ISO that goes down to 64. I think between 100 ISO and 64 ISO is like a whole stop of light. That's major. I mean, major. You can shoot glass, 1.2 glass wide open in direct sun at like 132,000 shutter speed and 64 ISO. I mean, that's awesome. That's crazy. So that's a huge set. And I don't even think the Canons or I don't know about this because I don't use those other brands, but I think that Nikon's the only electronic shutter speed that's electronic only that goes up to 132,000. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's a major deal. So huge plus for that over the Z6 II. Love the sensor cover. Okay, so I don't know if you guys know about this, but it doesn't have the mechanical shutter, but it does have the shade, the mechanical shutter shade that still goes down. So when I shut the camera off, it covers the sensor. So if I'm in a reception hall and it's black and I'm trying to change lenses and there's shit in the air or like whatever, like I'm outside, I don't have to really protect my camera when the lens is off because that sensor shade comes down. Really nice because it's going to save me some time, extra time cleaning the sensor. It's not, you know, the biggest thing, but it's definitely nice to have, and I'm glad they included it. Next thing is dynamic range is, dude, the dynamic range in this camera is insane. I mean, and this is just what I've come to expect from Nikon cameras. Insane build quality, insane image quality, insane dynamic range, and the dynamic range is incredible. I mean, it's just incredible. And you know, this is where a lot of like classical photographers have been doing this for a long time, have really put a lot of work into the craft, and I totally get it. Get irritated with this because somebody new can just grab a Z8 if they have the money and go out and take a photo with poorly lit subjects and poorly lit, you know, compositions, and then just, you know, Photoshop just create all this. It's not even a photo anymore. It's like graphic design. Okay, you know, I understand why that pisses you off, but like, this is the reality is if you're a photographer and you think that you can just rely on a camera to make great photos for you, you're never going to really make any money, and you're not going to be able to make a career out of this outside your, you know, immediate social circle, because people have come to expect great photos, in focus photos, and, you know, lit photos. Now you have to really be on point with your composition and your, you know, your lighting and your presence, and it's just so many other things that people say. Photography is going to whole new levels now because the camera technology has gotten so good that it doesn't matter if you can take a photo that's in focus and lit, because everybody can do that, or they can just do a half-assed job on site and then play with the rest in Photoshop. Real photographers, though, have built an identity and a brand around unique photos that have a message in them, so you'll never get around that. But this camera, the dynamic range is insane. I can shoot like 2, 3, 4 stops under exposed and bring everything up in post and it still looks good. Blacks are incredible. Highlights get saved. Just dynamic ranges, there's nothing else to say about it. I mean, I can't even imagine it being better, honestly. It's really good. Punch-in DX mode is great. So on the Z6 II, I have mine on photo mode. I have the image crop set to the record button. So if I just push the record button on the Z6 II, I have to hold it like the ISO and then roll the back to switch between FX and DX. With this, I can just press it once and it goes into DX, press it again, it comes back to FX. That's super important because, you know, I'm moving around less. Yesterday on the speeches at the wedding, I basically sat in 1 or 2 spots because I was just shooting wide, then punching in, shooting wide, punching in, and it saves you a lot of distraction. Like I'm not gonna be that type of photographer that says I'm not gonna go get that awesome shot because I don't want to be distracting. The shot comes first, but if I can get the shot and be less distracting, that's just a huge plus. So I can do that with the Z8. I can just punch in one button rather than having to hold it and roll it with the Z6 II. So it just makes everything faster and easier. I love the volume shutter sound. Okay, this is kind of a preference thing, but no mechanical shutter, so you can, the sound that comes out when you press the shutter is a fake sound they just add. And I just think it's a pleasing sound. It's really nice. I set it to volume 2, okay, so it's, my clients can still hear me shooting, but it's very unobtrusive and it's very low. I like to have a sound because I felt like, we just had a photo shoot done, me and Sarah, with Furwaristi, and man, that guy is just such an incredible photographer. He's just next level. He's so amazing. He's came up from Mexico and just incredible. Now, but he shoots completely silent, okay? And it was really tough to get comfortable with that because as somebody on the other side of the camera, and I equated it to my clients, obviously, because when he would put us and set us up in a photo, excuse me, he would be shooting, I didn't even know, like, so I'm just standing there, or me and Sarah are standing there like awkwardly, like not knowing whether or not he's shooting or not. And when I'm working with clients, I like to let them know that I'm working with them. So once we start shooting and I pose them and they're working within the confines or boundaries of the pose that we're coming up with, or composition, I'm shooting, they know I'm shooting, so we're all working together. I feel like you should leave the shutter on. Okay, I feel like from a client's perspective, because I was on the other side of the camera, that's just me though. I'm not dogging Furwaristi, he's a master, I'm not whatever, but from my client's perspective, I feel like they want to know that you don't want a D700 slap all the time while you're in a ceremony at a church or whatever, but having a subtle activation of the camera so they know that you're working with them is helpful. But I love the shutter sound, it sounds good. Let's see, light up buttons, really nice. If you click over to on, it turns the camera on, and then you click over one more, it lights up all the buttons in the back. So I can see at night in the reception halls or when it's dark, I can see all my menu buttons and all the buttons, they all light up. Super, super nice thing that the Z6 II didn't have that I actually missed because they had it on the D850. Let's see here, focus peaking. More sensitive. Okay, and I'm going to tell you guys, I don't know, I did a video on this, but I'm not going to make you go watch the other video to get the tip. If you turn on focus peaking in the menu, you don't have to turn the lens into manual or roll into the manual focus mode to activate the peaking. All you have to do, press and hold the back button focus, and then grab the focus wheel, and focus peaking will automatically activate, and you'll see the sweep from front to back. How amazing is that, right? So you don't have to go in like, oh, I have to change it to manual to get my focus peaking. It's like, no, if I'm in AFC or AFS and I'm shooting and all of a sudden I want to, sweep the focus plane with the peaking highlights to see what's in focus, I can just push the back button focus, grab the wheel, and I can see it right there. Now, I feel like the focus peaking is more sensitive with the Z8. I use the focus peaking actually a lot because it's so easy to sweep that focal plane with this. I use the Z8 focus peaking a lot, and it's definitely more sensitive than the Z6. It just looks more precise when I get in focus. More things are highlighted, and it's just a better experience. So I just wanted to bring that up because it's actually an important thing if you use focus peaking a lot. So that's really it, guys. Would I upgrade to the Z6 or Z8 from the Z6 II if I was a wedding photographer? Yeah, I would. Okay, I wouldn't just completely get rid of my Z6 II right now if I didn't have the money, but if you have the money set aside, I would start upgrading, and I wouldn't go straight, if you have two Z6 II bodies, I wouldn't just sell them both and then get two Z8s. I would do one and one to get comfortable with it, because this is the thing that kind of irritates me with the Z8. When I went from the D850 to the Z6, I immediately got faster with my photography. Immediately got faster. It was a major upgrade. I loved it. Even though the autofocus wasn't as good, I was like, wow, I'm a lot faster. I get more footage. I get more in the action with this thing. This, I feel like I'm taking a step back in terms of my speed, and I'm going to have to relearn some things and get used to the body. So, you know, it's a little bit disappointing because I like when I get a new camera, I like to have my improvements immediately and not have to kind of get used to anything. But the body's just not as comfortable to hold. It's bigger, it's chunkier, it doesn't stick to my hand as much. The wheels are not as good. There's some things that I'm just gonna have to get used to with it. But overall, does it help me take better photos? Yes. Okay. Major white balance improvement, major autofocus improvements, major quality improvements. It just feels like a better camera. It definitely does. So I would say start to upgrade and start to put money aside for the Z8 for sure. It's just a phenomenal camera. Nikon did a good job, but they did skimp on some things that really pissed me off, and I wish that they didn't. I wish they put a little bit more thought into the ergonomics and the build quality, and you know, they continue to roll out some software upgrades for the autofocus for sure, because it still needs some help. And I think that they packed enough processing hardware in there to where they can really work on that algorithm and get it perfect up to speed with Nikon, or I'm sorry, Canon and Sony. So that's my review of the Z8 from a wedding photographer's perspective. I'm gonna keep rolling out tips and things I learned on this, so stay tuned. But if it helped you, or if you have some thoughts or anything like that, leave them in the comments. Yeah, and until the next video, my friends.